Hi, Lauren. Welcome.
Hi
How,
Jeff, how are you?
all right. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm well today. Thank you. Yeah, I'm in a pretty good mood.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, I mean, you know how these sessions go, and I always like to check on your mood and see how you're feeling. Can you anything from the past week you'd like to share with me?
Yeah, I think so last week when I came to talk to you, I was having a really hard time because of those rumors about layoffs and just like the kind of tension at work. And so I actually ended up, trying to take some of the lessons I'd learned here and I actually confronted my boss about it and shared my concerns and said that I was nervous. And I appreciate she was very forward with me and that she said that, if layoffs happen, they're out of her control, but that she really values my work and that she thinks I'm a very valuable member of the team. And it really brought me a lot of comfort.
Lauren, that's wonderful. I commend you for having that conversation, and that cannot have been an easy thing for you to do. And I think a month ago you wouldn't have dreamed of doing it. So that's
Yeah.
it's a sign of a lot of progress.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt so too.
Um, how did I have to know what how you felt about it afterward? Did you feel like you represented yourself in the way that you wanted to? Um,
Yeah, I think this reminded me of when we talked about in the week that I had conflict with my boss, how I felt afterwards. I think the after effect felt very similar. I think I was, I felt proud of myself. I was a little bit on cloud nine just because of like her positive feedback. And I still had this aftershock of like, stress, anxiety, like doubting, like should I have said that? Like did I go like too far out on a limb? So I think like again, like a lot of those conflicted feelings happened, maybe a little more heightened to be honest, because the positive was so much higher, but I think that's generally how I felt.
that okay, interesting. I'd like to hold on to that and come back to it in a minute, but I want to first talk about the homework that I assigned you for last week, which in the past week, which was you were going to practice mindfulness. I think I said 3 times a week for any time that you after you felt stressful moments at work,
Mhm.
and any time between 3 and 20 minutes long, whatever you were comfortable with. How did that go? I'm curious about it.
Yeah, it was okay. I could definitely tell that this felt a lot harder than like the sticky notes, like the affirmations that we talked about, or some of the other techniques. Because like for example, I tried to do like a mindfulness moment after this big conversation I just told you about, and that felt impossible. I think that like I just felt so distracted, like my mind was racing, and my ability to not judge my thoughts, like we talked about, just felt impossible. But I did end up trying it a few days later, after just kind of like a tough interaction with a coworker. And in that moment, I was able to do it for about 5 minutes, just like in the break room by myself. And, I tried to like remind myself of how you said to like focus on my breath, and that really did help. So, work in progress.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. These are all steps, and maybe I maybe I should have been more specific about, like have trying to do this right after a stressful moment is sometimes very, very difficult. So that is completely
Mhm.
understandable. I'd be curious to know how you responded doing it now, thinking about that moment, because now that you have a little bit of distance, it might feel slightly different, and it might be easier to sort of accept
Yeah.
thoughts and not judge them. But you're right, in the heat of the moment, it is
Mhm.
very hard to quiet that you know to let those voices go. um
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you tried mindfulness. I'd like to talk just kind of about, let's want to set the agenda for this week.
Hmm.
Um, it's, what would you like to focus on? What's the most important thing if we only have time to cover, one or two
Mhm.
items? Last week, we focused on some of the how you were able to stand up to some of your colleagues, but it
Hmm.
was a lot harder with your boss. You've just told me that if not stood up to your boss, but at least told your boss, you let your boss in and told your boss a little bit about how you felt, which feels like progress. But what would you like to focus on?
I think I would like to focus on like that conversation and its aftermath. Like, I think probably thinking about, yeah, like kind of how to come down from those moments still. I think that working with you has really helped me build confidence to, yeah, put myself out there like that. But I think caring for myself still afterwards is hard. So,
Okay, that's good, and that kind of leads me to something that I'd like to try this week, which may dovetail perfectly with what you're describing. It's something called REBT, which is Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy.
hmm,
Um, and part of what this does is it basically talks about everybody has rational beliefs and they have irrational beliefs.
hmm,
What REBT does is it looks for those irrational beliefs and the rational beliefs, and you define each of them, and then you distinguish between what's irrational and what's rational. So I think
hmm.
if we take this situation and this conversation that you had with your boss, it's a perfect example. Let's talk about this.
Hmm.
Um, what were your automatic thoughts that were elicited from this conversation? And you've sort of told me a little bit, but I'd love to hear kind of a little bit more in depth.
I think like a very immediate automatic thought was like, she's gonna think less of me now. Like, the effect of this conversation, even though she told me that like I was competent and did good work, was that like I've like cheapened myself. She's gonna think that I'm like insecure, that, I like can't hold my own in the workplace.
Okay. And is that did you what did you say to her? Did you say, essentially you're nervous about these layoffs, or was there something more than that?
Yeah, I think so. Pretty much the way the conversation went was that we were in her office for our weekly meeting, and kind of similar to you, she always asked at the end like any feedback or any comments, and I pretty much kind of awkwardly brought it up. To be honest, I wouldn't say it was super smooth, but I was just like, I'm hearing about these layoffs, and I guess I was just like, I'm wondering if is there anything I should be aware of or that I should be working on. Given their possibility, and she responded really really nicely in that moment, and I think she handled most of the conversation, so I just kind of like breached or broached the topic.
Mhm. So it sounds like one of your emotions was you were worried that she was going to think less of you, think that you were insecure,
Hmm.
that you were um, worried about your place there, and somehow that made you a
Yeah.
less valuable piece of the piece of the team in some way.
Right. Hmm.
Okay. Um, so let's talk about this thought. Um, the idea of worrying that this person will think you're insecure. Um, why does that matter to you?
Yeah, I know, even as you like were saying it, I was like, it's kind of funny to hear someone focus on it so much, but I think it matters to me because I feel like people who project themselves as like more confident, more capable, like more secure, oftentimes like do better, like are seem as like having better performance, like being better team players, and that like they don't like need to be coddled, really. They don't need that like extra support that a more like insecure person would need, and so they're not as like needy either.
Okay. What are some other possible thoughts that you think your boss might have had beyond this worry that she thinks, oh, Lauren is insecure? What other possibilities are there?
I think the other thing that I was afraid of was like, oh, did I just like kind of like bring it to her mind, like to kind of review like why maybe should I be let go? You know, like by bringing it up, does that send her mind into a place of like, oh, maybe she hadn't thought about it, but now she is. And so when she actually thinks about it, she's like, wait, I was just being polite to Lauren, but there's actually all this other stuff.
So you worry that you planted the seed of doubt
Hmm.
in her mind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Can you think of other possible responses that your boss might have had beyond what you're describing, whether good or bad?
I mean, I do think that like a very kind of like normal response for a boss to have would be like, of course, my employee is concerned about layoffs. Like, especially since in the industry they've been so sweeping lately, I imagine that she's probably having this conversation with a lot of people and is anticipating it. So that's, I guess, what I would expect when you ask.
Okay. Do you, does it, part of what this rational emotive behavior therapy does, and I don't want it to sound like some fancy thing that I'm pulling
Mhm.
out, but it's part of it is asking for evidence, and that is it, do you have any evidence that your boss feels this way about you, that you're insecure, that
Hmm.
you know that you should be let go or something like that? Do you have evidence for that?
Mhm. It's a
A
good
better
question.
way of
Like,
asking is, does it make
yeah.
sense to believe it?
Oh, um, I think that like in my down moments, I feel like I can like find evidence or like reasons that make it believable, but like my gut says no. Like I don't think there's actually any true evidence. Like sometimes she'll like come to my office and like check in on me and be like, "How are you doing?" Which I think is like very normal. But when I'm really anxious, I'll be like, "Oh, like she's coddling me. Like she's trying to take care of me." But when you like directly ask like is there evidence like truthfully, I don't think so.
Is there evidence that she understands why you came to her, that of course you're concerned about layoffs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess so. Like in the conversation, she did mention that like this has just been a common like source of conversation among the management team and that like they're all like talking about it, like reviewing like how to have that conversation like as a company, which I mean, I guess like technically that means that they're trying to figure out how to talk about it with us in a way that's like good and makes sense. So,
Okay. Um, does it does it help you or hinder you to have this belief that your boss is believes that you're insecure, and does it give you, is there any benefit to it, I guess is what I'm asking.
oh, that I'm insecure? Is there any benefit to that?
To
Honestly,
your
no.
boss thinking that.
What'd you say?
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is there any benefit to your boss believing that about you?
No, I really don't think so. I think that my boss could easily believe that like maybe something truer, like I'm sensitive, and that like maybe that could produce a benefit, like her checking in on me, but for her to like truly think that I'm insecure, like that does not seem useful actually.
Okay. And does it seem useful to imagine that your boss understands your concern about layoffs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess I would like really, really hope she would. And that it'd be like hugely beneficial for her to understand because ultimately I think a part of the reason why I get so concerned is because like she should be my advocate. Like she's the one who sees my work and reviews it. And so outside of me advocating for myself, like I do depend on her for that. So
Okay. Well, that sounds good. I mean, it sounds like, judging by what you've just said, you said, I think, in your gut, um, the rational belief is that your boss is understands this concern that you have, and even though you'll have these doubts, that you're worried in moments of stress, particularly that, oh gosh, she thinks I'm insecure now I've planted the seed that I should be one of the ones laid off.
right.
Gut, what you've told me is, it makes more sense. It's more rational to believe that your boss appreciated that you came in and understood
Mhm.
where you were coming from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I even think even to like build on it based on what you're saying, like she probably doesn't want me laid off either because like that would reflect poorly on her team. So I think that like, what you're saying is really pushing me to think about like, how's there like how is like believing in my gut feeling like really making me feel better like more holistically anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I we're as we get closer to the end of the
Mm,
session here, I just want to make sure that I'm conscious of your time, and I want to summarize kind of what we did to make sure that we're on the same page. It sounds like, uh, based on the interactions that you've had in the past week,
mm,
um, with your boss, with your colleagues, um, that in your gut you are feeling a little bit more secure about your place there, and that yes, those feelings of insecurity and those worries will be there. But when we talked about these beliefs, it seemed like you were showing me with your words that you found this belief that your boss is on your side slightly more rational, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I know that rational and irrational, like when it comes right down to it, like it's hard to convince yourself of things when, you know,
Mm,
you're in the heat of the moment. But
mm,
I think that leads me into what I'd like you to do for the next week, which
mm,
is to, and it's similar to this, what I did a few weeks ago about taking these feelings out for a test drive. And this
mm,
is kind of along the same lines. It really is, when you have these thoughts, worries that your boss is going to see you as, expendable. I don't think you used the word expendable, but somebody that might be laid off, or,
yeah, yeah.
feeling insecure.
Mm,
Do what we just did, which is ask yourself a number of questions that's designed to prove whether it makes sense or not. Where is the
mm,
evidence of this? Does it make sense to believe this? Does it help me to believe this, or does it hurt me to believe this?
mm,
And you can do that with positive thoughts. I mean, I'm sorry, rational thoughts,
uh,
and thoughts that don't seem to make sense to you. It's really just practicing thinking about what's going through your head and testing it. Does that make
mm.
sense?
Yeah, so basically the exercise we did today, but just trying it out in my like daily life.
Exactly.
Okay.
My
Mhm.
goal is to for you to be able to do all the things that we do in these sessions and not really need me.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. I think our time is about up. Do you feel like is your takeaway from this week that was most helpful of all the things that we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just really appreciate this idea of thinking about, these beliefs, like, do they hinder me? And like maybe how are they getting in my way or how are they benefiting me? And really evaluating that trade-off, which I think I don't do usually. And I typically focus on like how it could hinder me. So I like that as like a shifted way of thinking.
Yeah, it's a shifted way of thinking. That's exactly it. And sometimes that takes a little bit of work and it can be exhausting, but it I find that it helps me personally. So um thank you for coming, and thank you for making yourself vulnerable, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah. All right. That sounds great. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, bye.